Hi, I'm Tim, he's Josh, and welcome to WatchBox. This is our first meeting of East and West. We are introducing this regular feature expressly for our Hong Kong clientele, audience, and fans. Josh, what are you seeing at the ground level right now? What's the collector into in Hong Kong? Because I'm an out-of-towner.
Well, Tim, first of all, it's great to see you. It's been too long since you and I have spoken, and glad to see you're keeping well.
So far, so good.
It's funny, despite the situation, that everybody's facing globally, the watch market in Hong Kong is as alive and energized as it ever has been. And there's a few key things that we're seeing, most notably in the recent months, that although they existed before, is much more prevalent, I would say, today. The first thing that caught my attention about 2 or 3 months ago, the majority of clients who are contacting me to buy a watch they're trending towards smaller case sizes. So even though Hong Kong generally did prefer smaller sizes, we still got the collectors who like their big pilots or bigger Panerais, the 44 to 47 millimeter range. Whereas now it's really surprising and rare that I get a request for a watch over 42 millimeters, or really even over 40 millimeters. So that's one of the most notable changes I've seen in the past 2 to 3 months.
I see that generally, and in fact, I think some brands have very strategically started pulling back. The one that really caught me, because Audemars Piguet sort of is the middle of the high luxury market, like they're sort of the center of gravity for the whole thing. They went back to 38 millimeters with their chronograph last year, and frankly, in all of the noise surrounding the code 1159, that news kind of got lost, which is unfortunate because it was probably their best new release of the year. But the jump back to something close to their original 39 millimeter chrono really caught my eye, and I thought that was possibly the most important Audemars Piguet of last year, and the best new AP of the year is always big news. Also, we've seen a pullback over the last couple of years in terms of what the brands are doing at the top level. JLC started downsizing its Master series. It went from 41s to 40s to 39s across the board. We saw IWC even pull a few millimeters off most of the pilots that weren't the big pilot. So this does seem to be a real direction, and I would say even in the case of something like Hublot, the king power is gone. You don't see those 48, 49, 50 millimeter, fist-sized watches anymore, even at the aggressive sports watch end. And Rolex very subtly reprofiled the deep sea, so it wore more like a 44 millimeter watch and less like a submarine. So I definitely see that happening at the manufacturer level. Yeah, I do think as big a market as Hong Kong has been in the past, it's been up to, between 15 and 20% of all Swiss watch exports. That is the difference. Now, it's obviously a center for watch tourism, but there is a big domestic clientele for that sort of thing that you see on the streets. And that's the difference between watches being a subculture in the United States and a culture in Hong Kong. They're part of the culture in Hong Kong. In the United States, the guy who's wearing a watch, he's probably the guy you want to talk to about like Italian motorcycles and old Saabs. He's an unusual guy. Definitely see that.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, what kind of watches are you wearing lately? Because I'm predictable. I've got Mr. Zin right here, and my folks know that one well. What kind of watches are you wearing lately? What are you into personally?
Well, obviously, true to form, historically, I've always been a day date and date just guy. Nothing makes my heart more excited and skip a beat than vintage day dates. I love the 1980s era of colorful dials, things like that. That being said, the most recent piece I've purchased is from another brand that I've always really appreciated but never, invested in, and that's Breguet. I've seen a lot of the videos that you've produced, and it's really kind of inspired me to get more into the brand. So I have a Breguet, it's a 7027 Tradition.
Yes.
We'll get a better picture on the screen later. But for me, like yourself, I have a smaller profile wrist. So the 37 millimeter 7027 for me is it's a sweet spot. The watch is absolutely perfect in terms of proportion. And I've had the watch for a few months now, and I smile every time I check the time on this piece.
We got a lot of fans out there watching, so if you guys are wondering a little bit more about Josh's watch right there, in 2005, about 5 years after the Swatch purchase of the Breguet brand, that watch came out, and it immediately became the modern-day face of Breguet. So if you want something that's actually just as nicely made as a hot independent, much more available, and at 38 millimeters perfectly sized, you deserve to treat yourself to a little bit of 7027, because ultimately I don't think there's an independent anywhere near that price point that is making a more finely finished watch, or one that more completely bears its soul on your wrist, because it's all there dial side.
And it's directly descended from that Breguet subscription pocket watch. So you look at those together, I think that if Breguet were alive and well making watches today, this absolutely could have been a watch that he himself would have designed and manufactured for his clients. It makes me very happy, this piece.
Man, I got nothing to compare to that. I'm thinking like the watches I'd like to add to my collection next. I would love a Milgauss Z Blue, and I think the fans out there who followed some of my shows already know I'm hot for that watch, but that's got to happen eventually. It's going to be that or a white gold oyster quartz Day-Date with a lapis dial. In terms of other watches that are on my hit list, I would love an MIH watch. Automatic, water-resistant annual calendar designed by Ludwig Oxlin, from a mechanical standpoint, built by Paul Gerber, and Christian Gaffner did the style of it. It's like an anthology of Switzerland's best in a compact, nondescript, like postmodern case. So that's probably where I'm going. If I wanted to go high horology, I think we've gotten to the point where Ulysse Nardin is too underrated and overlooked, and I'd be looking very seriously at a Sonata for the Alarm and the GMT. Gorgeous pieces.
It's funny you mentioned that. Ulysse Nardin, the Sonata is an incredible watch. But even the basic perpetuals that they produce, I think that's some of the most robust, well-made, and most durable perpetual calendars you can buy. And they present an incredible value proposition. So in-house movements. And the little detail that I like the best is that you can scroll back and forth in the calendar, forwards and backwards, to no detriment to the watch itself. It's really an ingenious system. I'm surprised.
It's kind of funny. You're absolutely right. People with the IWC perpetual calendar, they'll turn the crown a few too many times in the wrong position. They take it to the watchmaker and he says, you got to not wear your watch for a month, because you go all the way forward and it moves in one direction. Ulysse Nardin, you could ram that calendar forward or backwards. It's almost impossible to break. It's like Rolex tough. That's where my heart is right now. That's where my head is too. What kind of watches are hot right now where you are? Like, I know right here, FP Journe is what the collector is looking to get, and I always try to steer them toward alternatives because there's a lot out there, but the heart wants what the heart wants, and we're seeing a lot of Journe heat right now. What are you seeing in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I mean, other than the usual suspects, which are, the Rolexes, the Royal Oaks, the Nautiluses, and Aquanauts of the world, FP Journe is definitely the end-all be-all of what people are searching for at the moment. Other than that, we are seeing people asking questions and starting to become more interested in having that discussion about independence. And there could be modern independence like your Ruthenium's, piece brands like that, or what we call the neo-vintage independence, which when I say that, I mean Roger Dubuis, but Roger Dubuis pre-Richemont. So the older sympathies in the 37 or 34 cases, the arabesque shaped crystals. People are really starting to ask questions about these watches. And anytime one pops up on the market here, it's snatched up, before you can even, realize it's available. So I think this might be another trend in the near future. These watches that are just so beautifully made and truly irreplaceable, and there's nothing else like them on the market. People want something unique and that their friends will not have. I think specialty is really going to speak volumes in the near future.
And I definitely see where you're coming from, the neo-vintage perspective. Roger Dubuis from the 1990s, the original homage and sympathy watches, especially the shaped sapphire, the watches that were built when the company was still called Sogem, when you got a Besançon Observatory chronometer certificate and the Geneva seal paperwork with the watch. And if you looked on the chronometer certificate, a lot of times the reguleur was listed as Roger Dubuis himself. Those are great watches. I don't understand why Richemont doesn't at least have a line in Dubuis. Yeah, I get they're all Lamborghini big and bad, and every watch they sell is a tourbillon these days. But still, why don't they have a classical line in the catalog for the folks who are otherwise going to go out and buy a 25-year-old watch off of Chrono 24 when they could get something just like that from Dubuis today, if Dubuis would just swallow its pride and say, okay, we got it right back then, right the first time, we're going to bring back the sympathy. If not the homage, the sympathy. I don't know.
By the way, I think you're absolutely on it. If they were to do that, keep it limited, protect the distribution of that watch, maybe make it like their version of a subscription or something really kind of special, that could absolutely bring Dubuis, as we know it today, back into the limelight where it really does deserve to be.
And all of the original independents weren't super high-end. Remember, in the late 80s and through the late 90s, Chronoswiss was very hot. G.R. Lange was essentially the watch collector's watchmaker because he had a collection of 800 watches. And Chronoswiss did things with skeleton chronographs and jump hours and retrogrades. They did fun things with watches that were reasonably priced in their day. And now that Chronoswiss is under new management and ownership, they're very slowly starting to, they've got their new designs and they sell those, but they're very slowly starting to roll out re-editions of their originals. And those are the watches that the collectors want. Roger Dubuis, please make this happen.
By the way, Chronoswiss, I would love to see them bring back an Opus skeleton chrono with that beads of rice.
Oh, yeah.
How amazing. Yeah.
Delphus jump hour, my man. I'm all about that. That had a sterling silver dial back when no one was doing sterling silver dials. And it was an affordable watch in steel. I mean, today they are a steal.
You know, you're talking about like reeditions and all these special pieces from the original generations. Another thing we're noticing is that collectors, you know, the really diehard collectors are becoming much more deliberate in hunting down complete sets of pieces in their collections. So, you know, for example, the easy one to, you know, make a comparison to is the Journe Ruthenium set. So we have clients who've had like one or two of the watches over the years. Now they're like really putting so much time and effort into doing whatever they can in their power and that their budgets allow to put that whole set together. And before it's been like, well, yeah, you know, have one or two pieces. I have the resonance or I have the tourbillon. If I get the other one's great. If not, then it doesn't matter. I'll survive. But now it's like people are really, really heart bent on making that happen. And it could be as basic as people want every variation of the modern day Daytona. So they want the oyster flex of different dials, the brace of different dials, steel in both colors. It's building a collection, building a theme within their possession, which seems more prevalent now that at least I've noticed myself in the past by 6 months to a year.
You know, it is extraordinary that you mentioned that because just the other day we had a collector, I believe in Hong Kong, who purchased, as part of one deal, all of the 5 original Ruthenium Journes, and we'll talk about what that means in a moment. And then he also got one of each medal for the Patek Philippe Cloisonné Enamel World Time 5131. So he got all 3 golds and platinum, and out the door they went, 2 complete sets of unbelievable watches. And you're absolutely right about people looking for the Journe sets. They're looking for the steel 38mm set from 2014. They're looking for the Ruthenium set from 2000, it was roughly 2001 to 2004, those were made, the manuals and then the autos. And they're looking for the 3 Vagabondage watches, and the first one is the hard one to find. I suppose if someone really wanted to scale Olympus, they'd try to find matching serial numbers, but I think even by Hong Kong standards, that might be too zany.
Right. You know, talking about the enamel Patek, especially the cloisonné piece and just the enamels in general, a lot of the guys are saying, and I tend to agree now after hearing it and after seeing where the market is going, that the Anita Porcher generation pieces are going to be the pieces to have after she retires or is no longer, you know, doing what she's doing. She's kind of become the gold standard in enamel work and cloisonné, you know, production. That I think after she's, you know, retired or no longer with Patek or, you know, producing for the other brands, that those pieces she produced are going to be collector's pieces in their own right. It could just be the basic 5131s or pieces she done for other brands. Her stuff really is like, there's really no words when it comes to her work.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that she did a lot of work for Jacques Dro after the company was reestablished in 2001. And if you want to get Anita Porcher without paying the Patek premium, there's a heck of a lot of early Jacques Dro from the 2001 refounding of the brand through about the early 2010s. And a lot of that stuff is unattributed. If you want to do a little bit of forensic reconstruction and write some letters, you're going to find an awful lot of value. Jacques Dro, again, it's a Swatch Group brand that Swatch Group doesn't really know what to do with. But if you look at the people who were behind the craft art pieces, they were very special. And again, Anita Porcher did a ton of work for them. So another thing I wanted to mention is that there's a lot of interest in sort of undiscovered value right now. Some of those neo-vintage watches, early examples of modern independence. I'm hearing more and more interest. I think there's even a book in the works about early de Bethune, the company we all call de Bethune. And these watches are unbelievable. And there was huge change in the aesthetics of them over the years. They're almost the anti-FP Journe in that regard. Unbelievable movements, but a 1999 subscription tourbillon from FP Journe looks like a 2020 FP Journe watch, whereas a DB1 chronograph from 2002 from de Bethune, it does not look like any watch they make today. And so there's a wonderful variety of what's out there. If you're talking about early MB&F, Grubel Forsey from the mid-2000s, de Bethune. Of course, the Grunefeld brothers are becoming very hot. They've only been around for a short while. The first of the Romain Gaultier watches were only made in about 2006, 2007, I want to say, with the HM. And there are just a lot of incredible independents that are now approaching 10, 15, 20 years old that also deserve to be part of that discussion. And frankly, when a lot of folks are into independence, but they have qualms about servicing or longevity or reliability, I often say, have you considered Lange and Breguet? And clearly you've considered Breguet. Unbelievable stuff. You want to get yourself a tourbillon, a perpetual calendar, an unbelievable watch at an unbelievable price, go that direction. You'll also find the 100-meter water-resistant sports watch that you can't get, for example, from FP Journe in any steel marine. But let's talk a little bit about Lange. What kind of a pulse does Lange have in East Asia right now? I know what I'm feeling over here, and I'll share my views, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, to be honest, it's been a little bit quiet lately on the Lange front. I have a certain number of clients, a select few, who are deeply passionate about this brand. They swear by it, and they might have some other pieces, but I've never seen them out in the open wearing anything but a Lange. Those type of clients are, going for the best of the best. Pour Le Marie, Handverkunst dials, things like this. I've even seen a steel Lange 1, one of the first gen pieces, one of these guys' possession. So it's really the more exceptional watches. The Lange 1, the standard models, do carry cloud here, and they do sell very well. Unfortunately, we've had some datograph perpetuals, datograph up-downs, some of those more modern pieces that don't sell as easily here. And I'm afraid it's because of the bigger profile on the wrist. Although some of them are only 42 millimeters, they're quite thick. So even though the watch, lug-wise, lug-to-lug can, it can work, the thickness really deters a lot of people here. The one watch that people talk about a lot is the dephorograph, or the 39 millimeter, datograph, which in my mind is probably the one to have if you're going to take the dive. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I did get to interview Philippe Dufour at Dubai Watch Week late last year, and I asked him, do you have any thoughts to share on other people's watches? And in so many words, he said, 3 brands have caught my eye: Rolex for the quality of what you get, especially the Pepsi GMT, Nomos, and of course my Lange, which is now called the Dufourograph. He was very proud of the fact that the black dial rose gold 39 millimeter first generation datograph now bears his name unofficially. And Philippe Dufour, that's about as good as you can get. Nomos, he's looking at it as value. Rolex, he admires the consistency. But when he speaks about Lange, he's speaking about the backside of the watch, the finishing of the thing, the engineering of the thing. That's where he sees a piece of himself, I think. And it's true, some of the bigger Lange watches don't appeal quite as much, just because they've got sort of an anachronistic case shape. It feels like you're wearing a pocket watch almost on your wrist. So with the 42s, even some of the bigger pieces like the Lange 31, they're out of this world in terms of how they fit. They're huge. The Terra Luna is huge. They're all big. But if you look at some of the core models, you can get a Lange 1, 38.5 millimeters. It's not too thick. It's not too big. It's a core collection watch. To that, you can add a 39 millimeter datograph. Do you want to go and shoot the moon and try to find the ultimate? You're going to go for a yellow gold model and try to find it on a bracelet. And then there are other models. If you're not necessarily into the Zeitwerk, which is large, there's no getting around the fact, 42 millimeters is big. You don't have to make that your third Lange to complete like the trio. I like to collect brands in threes. I feel like you get a good profile of a brand in threes. If it were Rolex, be the Daytona, the GMT, and the sub. With Lange, I think the best thing to do if you don't want to get that Zeitwerk is to get something that's maybe a little bit more compact, something that's a little bit offbeat, maybe the Saxonia thin copper blue, which for my money is just as appealing as the Journe. What do you think about that?
When you were talking about threes, I love that watch. The color is outstanding, outstanding. It's funny, you're talking about Dufour and his love for the datograph. In your interview with him, he said something that still resonates well with me, and I do think about. And what he said was that it really surprised him how the Swiss at that time, up until that time, had not produced a chronograph to that standard. Of course, he said it in much, better, better phrase.
A much heavier French accent, everything sounds more romantic.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But you look at that watch, you turn it over, and I'm almost more inclined to take the strap off, flip it around, just wear the watch upside down. Because when you wear the watch, time does not matter. All you want is just to see that work of art on the back. And it's out of that world. I've seen really nothing that compares to that from the Swiss.
It's very true. 1 year apart. And they often say back in the late 80s, Ferrari got a chance to see a prototype of the Acura NSX. And it was shocking to them. It was a supercar that was everyday drivable and dead reliable. They went back to Maranello and they were basically just furrowing their brows, rubbing their foreheads. All of a sudden, this was a sea change and a challenge like they'd never known. And that happened to the Swiss in 1999. 1998, Patek launches the 5070, and all is right with the world. Much lauded, huge for the time at 42 millimeters. Everyone loved that watch. And then in 1999, they'd had 12 months to party. The datograph arrived, and it was just like, it was not just the new kid on the block. It was a shock to the system. And Patek, the entire Swiss industry, they had to rethink not just how they finished their movements, but how they sourced them. That was basically what precipitated the end of Lemania movements in Patek Philippe chronographs. That was the sea change. He was absolutely right.
By the way, how many years did it take Patek to come out with their own in-house chrono, the 5170? It was not quick.
No, well, I mean, their first in-house chrono, I want to say it was the 5959 in like 2005. It was a tiny split-second watch, teeny, like 33 millimeters. And then their first automatic chrono was 2006 with the 5960 and the Nautilus 5980. So it took them long enough. But the other thing is, realistically, the 5170, that didn't come out until the 2010s. So ultimately, Patek did a couple of things. They built a bigger movement for a bigger case back. They finished to a higher standard, and they realized they had to make the movement themselves. Now, in-house movements are hugely overblown today. You ask me which Patek chronograph I want the 5070, and I want it with the Lemania movement. But that wasn't universal in the late 90s when in-house calibers were still considered a market distinction, and this like Aliviste newcomer from Saxony with Lange, they'd only been making watches since 1994 at that point. So I do say to people, if you want like FP Journe, but you want a collecting theme, think about getting all the Lange Handwerkskunst. Think about finding a steel Lange 1. Think about the Pour le Mérite series, or get the Walter Lange tribute in every available metal. These two are awesome collecting goals. And right now, that's not where money is looking. So you're going to pay something closer to true value and not market momentum, which is always tough to reconcile if you don't absolutely love the watch.
Another incredible value proposition where people are not paying attention. The 5070 is amazing, but the market, I think, is relative to what the watch is worth. The other watch that comes to mind, actually two watches really, are the 3940 and the 3970. I think these watches in yellow gold, the most classic iteration, represent an incredible value proposition. 3940 can be had in under 40 grand for the yellow gold silver dial. The 3970 perpetual chrono, arguably the greatest size, the most classic Patek watch they've made in the modern era. That's, well under $100,000. How does that make sense? It's crazy.
Well, it's always where the white hot spotlight is directed at any moment. They're not the stars of our time, but they're great watches. So I guess a question that comes to mind, since you mentioned it, is yellow gold and rose gold. How's colored gold doing in Hong Kong? Because I can tell you here in the United States, the only colored gold that sells at all is rose gold, and yellow gold's just about dead. Is there a different philosophy in the Hong Kong market?
Not that I've noticed. Yellow gold does sell very well here. We sell a lot of yellow gold watches. I see a lot of yellow gold watches on the street. You can see that a lot of the younger, demographic, when they wear yellow gold, they're going to be wearing Rolexes. So it could be anything from a vintage day to a modern gold tone on a bracelet. The Oyster Flex pieces on the rubber strap with the gold cases are very, very popular. But you see the older generation, the gold watches that they're wearing are always going to be like a 3940 or a Calatrava. What I mean by that is under the radar, classic, formal, no nonsense, not trying to say anything other than what it is. And I think you could see that those different collecting habits in a generational aspect. But other than that, yes, yellow gold is still very relevant here.
I'm sort of starting the movement to bring yellow gold back because we're talking about the 5070, and I'm honest, I like the black dial 5070J from 1998 the best. I think for an older watch, a formal watch, a traditionally sized watch, any vintage watch, yellow gold really looks good. It's got presence.
I think on the right strap, that watch could absolutely be worn casual and would just look absolutely incredible.
You know, I always like to say the man makes the watch, not the other way around. So when people ask me, could I wear this with a short sleeve? I said, I don't know, you tell me. Could you? You know, it's basically just saying, yeah, of course. You can wear your dress watch poolside as long as you don't jump in the pool. So make the watch. Innovate with your look, break the rules, and ultimately you will be super happy. If you feel you must pair watches with circumstances and attire, you're a slave to convention. So be that rebel. Do so with my blessing and Josh's. That's definitely the way to take a watch out of its environment. And I've always liked to say that the people with real style are the ones who have no style. And between the sunglasses and the utility watches, I'm doing everything I can on that front to have no style.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the other side of that is when it comes to buying watches, we always tell our clients, it doesn't matter what level of watch they're buying, how seasoned of a collector they are. It's so important because you're spending a lot of money to buy what's going to make you happy. Because at the end of the day, you're buying an object that's going to be a part of your body, on your body. So every time you look at it, if it doesn't make you smile, I think you're doing something wrong. And to buy something just because that's what people on Instagram or online say you should be buying, in my opinion, I'm sure you agree, is the totally wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, this should not be by remote control. You got to be the decision maker when creating your collection. And, you always have to just first pick the watch that you think looks best on your wrist. Because if you say, oh, it's supposed to be, this is the right brand, or this is the right movement, or this is the right watch, at the end of the day, you just got to love the way it looks. You got to feel good when wearing it. So don't listen to too many other people. The best reason to listen to other people is to discover things you might not have thought of. That's broadening your horizons. That's learning. That's doing research. The worst reason to listen to someone else is to hear what they would buy, because that's the death of collector satisfaction. You're not going to be happy if someone else wants your watch more than you do.
Correct. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. What's the coolest watch you've seen lately? Because I know the one I saw today blew my socks off. So what's the coolest watch you've seen? And I'll tell you mine.
We know lately, in terms of the past couple of days, we just saw a T30 yesterday. Everybody knows I'm a Journe apologist. I'm not going to, say sorry for that. They really do make me very excited personally. I saw a T30 yesterday. A client came in wearing one. That watch might be the ultimate stealth or under the radar power watch. To anybody, if you're not paying attention, even I didn't notice it, the second he came in. That watch could just be, any other watch, in the world, anything just very basic, very simple, not so important. And then when you really look and go, oh, wait a second, is that, what I think that is? Then he takes it off, you see it, you feel the engraving on the back of the case with your hand. You look close, you see the dial, it looks almost like vintage parchment. And the almost, what's the right word? The patina on the sterling silver case, it looks like an antique rifle. All these things start to come alive and ignite your senses. And for me, that watch is like, that's a watch that one day I will have. Even if it's, 50 years from now, that's such a Grail level watch. Yeah.
I've heard a rumor that F.P. Journe himself owns one. So of the original series in '99, one has been removed from the market. So you're going to be looking at an even rarer watch than you bargained for.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
Oh, I saw today, for the first time in my life, I've only seen an auction catalog photo of a Patek Philippe 5033P. It was made from 2002 to 2012, 38 millimeters by 51 millimeters. Cushion case, looks exactly like a 5135, but they only made fewer than 80 of them in that 10-year production span. Annual calendar, minute repeater, micro rotor automatic. It is possibly the coolest watch I have seen this year, not just lately. So for me, it's got to be that 5033P because I've never seen one before and I've seen everything. I've seen multiple Grubel 4Cs. I've had 7 Patek Philippe minute repeaters on a table at the same time. 5033, that's new to me and I'm blown away. I'm in love, and when it eventually finds a new home, I'm going to be heartbroken.
I'm so jealous. I've heard of this watch, like you have previously, but I've never seen one in person. So I'm actually very, very jealous of that one.
Let's enter our final round. Josh, let me know, what watch are you dying to see? Not necessarily own. What do you want to experience firsthand? Your dream horizon. What would you like to encounter?
Very good question. We have a collector of ours, a client in Japan, who collects all the all the goodies that anybody would want to see. He has a collection of Stella dials, day dates. For me, these are another grail level, item that I would love to have one day. And here and there, we do see one or two that pop up, and they're at some of the trade shows, or some dealers have them. But for me, what I want to see is not one watch; it's actually a whole set of watches. I'm cheating. I've seen he has about 10 or 12 of these. White gold, he has rose gold, he has yellow gold, the Tiffany blue, the turquoise green, the peach colored, yellows, all these fantastic, just unreal condition pieces that for me, those are what I want to see. And for me, if I had to pick one that I could take home with me, probably white gold case, of course, the president bracelet, and like that mint green Stella dial. For me, that's just cooler than cool.
That's good. I don't think I can beat that. Sorry, you shut the shop early. Okay, what would I love to see? Since I've seen so many crazy things, I would like to see something extraordinarily simple. Of all the hot models, all the limited editions, all the grand complications, one watch I have never encountered outside of a show environment is the Lange Sohne thin copper blue. It's haunting, it's bottomless, it's complex without complexity. It's the kind of watch that I don't even know how to describe. You see it like with your eyes and you feel it with your soul. That watch has a glow and a warmth to it. And I would love to have the opportunity just once to put it on my wrist and maybe share it online. Just to create a moment that I could remember with a watch that to me represents a counterpoint to anyone who ever claimed Germans aren't warm, emotional, fun, funny, thoughtful, and poetic like the Swiss. That watch proves they are, and it's a statement in white gold. I'd say it's a statement in steel, but it's not. So for me, it would be that.
And the sense of depth in that dial, it's a flat of entry dial at the end of the day, but it possesses a sense of depth that really comes to life, depending on the level of light, in which you're, in the room you're in. I absolutely agree with you on that. I think it's a great decision.
Your standard Lange watch is like Ernst Hemingway, a paucity of words, short, straight, to the point, uncomplicated but profound. Whereas the copper blue, that's like F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's got a lyrical quality.
It's much more poetic. Yeah.
So, Josh, parting shots?
Just lovely to see you, Tim. I can't wait to do the next one with you. We're very excited.
Time out, Tim out, Josh out, and thanks for logging on.